Anta Tamona Fuset Ika Sia. Greetings once again. I am Chief Min Waab. For those of you who already know, and for those of you who don't know, I am Chief of Kairi and Alubera Islands, Chief of the Kumanagotes, Tamanakos, Chemas, and the Arawakai. We've been this tribe, or these union of tribes, like we refer to ourselves in our constitution as the tribal union. We have been doing this for the past 8 years, and as a matter of fact, we have been we are the ones responsible for bringing this concept in terms of where your identity and how you portray yourself within the post-invasion of the indigenous lands. Within that type of dynamic, we were the first ones to bring it to the whole Caribbean in the form of self-identification via statutory declaration. Alright? So, what I'm about to speak to you about is not hearsay, is not something we're fishing about. It's something that we've been doing successfully, might I add, for the last 8 years. And throughout that time, we have had individuals come and go, right? Of late, we have had some questions again, you know, like every time I come out here on, well, these platforms, outside of what I had planned, is because we have to do some sort of disclaimer, because we have to be aware of the island that we own, the type of mentality that it carries, and a lot of people like to jump on a bandwagon on this island. Is a Trini mentality, right? But we, the indigenous, are not Trinis, Trinidadians, or Tobagonians, nor are we citizens of any corporate entity, right? That type of speak and that type of concept, we are responsible for that here in the Caribbean. So, as I said before, so now we have some of these individuals who are with us because of their savage nature, because of their inability to follow instructions, and because of their unwillingness to read and have an internalization of what we're teaching. Because of that, we had to separate ourselves from them on a couple occasions. Well, right? The last occasion where this individual that we have up on screen here, and this is not his appellation, this was given to him by our tribe, and upon leaving, everyone knows that all tribal paraphernalia, all tribal privileges and the likes are basically revoked. Whether it be that you leave voluntarily, or that you were, to put it in local terms, you were put out, right? For a number, whatever reason it be. Right. This individual on screen here, who calls himself by this name, he would soon find out what intellectual property theft and impersonation, or impersonating somebody, what that does, right? I'm going to go through this video and play it for, well, I guess everybody's seen it because everybody calling me. So I'm going to go through it and dissect it and debunk it piece by piece. I'm not on Facebook anymore, so I have to let the video run. And you would hear, well, you would hear what he's saying, and I'd pause it just to give the explanation and the proof as well. Sorry. All right. So Before I do that, I would like to say this, because a lot of people, since we out here 8 years now, when I first came out, we were madmen, crazy people, all kind of different names they call us. Fast forward to now, we is like the hottest topic of indigenous trending. But these same people who had all these negative things to say, they now want to jump on the bandwagon. But because we strict, because we keep run a tight ship, because we keep things disciplined, some people come in here with a Trini mentality and the corporate style thinking and think that they could do that same thing here. And so we don't have that. And so this is why it have stragglers like these out here. So the event that gave rise to this individual exactly, what he did was voluntary departure. And upon his voluntary departure, he volunteered to leave because we was changing the phases in the tribe and we had to do things more stricter and we had too much laissez-faire type of behavior going on, so we had to tighten things up. The day after the meeting, that was in May 2023, May 15th, right, the day after the meeting, or 2 days after, stand to be corrected, he came and he told me that he does not want to be a part anymore, and he done with that whole indigenous thing and he going and do his own thing. All right, cool, because we have no gun to anyone's head to follow or do what we're doing. So upon leaving, he is knowledgeable, as everybody is knowledgeable. Whoever was affiliated with the tribe or know about the tribe, they know that this name, Kairi Alubera, right, even the first name or the first appellation, all these names are copyright registered trademarks, right? And because we taking the legal route, because he's a civilian, right, we do recognize him as indigenous. 97, let me explain this now. At least 92% of the island indigenous. But the problem with that is the majority of you choose to be citizens of a corporation, right? That does not erase your indigenous genetics. What it does is it interferes with your status, right, and your actual right and on things that you could claim and that type of thing. So identifying as a citizen would have you at a deficit, right? So basically, I don't want to lose my train of thought. Right, so basically, for you to be identified as indigenous in this day and time, you must self-identify, right? Self-identify meaning on all fronts. You can't be a citizen and indigenous at the same time. Opposed to what these people here are telling you, it is diametrically opposed to what the indigenous stand for, and I'll tell you why. The mechanism that brought about citizenry or citizenship is the same mechanism that invaded the indigenous people lands, disenfranchised them, and stole their birthright, and continues to do that right now as I speak. Right? So we don't ever promote being a part of the machine that killed our ancestors or spilled our ancestral blood. Right? So this would debunk a whole barrage of people who out there, right, claiming to be, give me a second, who claiming to be indigenous. Now, when I now start off, I had made it my business to call out some groups, right? One of the groups was in 1992 under the PNM-led administration. They made a group called the Santa Rosa First Peoples, the, how to put it, boy, like the representation for indigenous people on the island. Now, I'd prove how that is a farce or a falsehood, right? So when they did that, their leader quote-unquote chief. We don't recognize him as no chief. He's not a chief. He has not done anything to be qualified as a chief. So his name is Ricardo Bharat. The word Bharat in Hindi means brother. The Hindus have only been on this island about 180 years now. So there is absolutely no way this guy could be indigenous. Furthermore, we have elders who associate with the tribe who went to school with him, and they know about his literal heritage, right? And he doesn't even have a mixture of us in his bloodline for him to even be claiming that he's some indigenous chief for this island, right? Because there were no Hindus here in the inception of this island, right? They are very well documented. They celebrate their arrival day and all that type of stuff. So obviously that was a government ploy, and that in itself is one of the ways they use to is a stolen identity, and they use that to disenfranchise the actual indigenous people, right? So that's one. Ricardo Bharat could never be indigenous, right? Two, Santa Rosa is literally Spanish for Saint Rose. Indigenous people knows nothing about saints. We never had saints. We never deal with no Jesus, no Allah. As a matter of fact, the battle that changed the colonization schedule in the Americas in 1699 was fought against religion, Islam and Christianity, right? So there is no way, absolutely no way, that no tribe could say they're indigenous and add any saint to our culture. So Saint Rose is out, right? So we're going again and we just debunking all these groups that popping up. Every time I take a break from social media to do actual chief work and actual indigenous work, they think the space empty and they just pop up and they run a whole barrage of nonsense, and then I get called out from the bush and from what doing to come and address these falsehoods, right? So Santa Rosa First People's out long time, right? Then we have this guy who, well, became, I wouldn't even call his name because I have been told by elders from down there in Moruga and people that close to him that he has mental problems, and mental health issue is a serious thing. So I wouldn't go at him like that, but I would just say this. No indigenous group, real indigenous group, would have the name Trinidad and Tobago attached to it. Furthermore, they wouldn't be bringing light skin straight here Venezuelans over here and talking about the indigenous. These same Venezuelans he talking about, when I speak to them, they know about Indio. And when we talking about that, they point and talk about people like us, looking like me. They have them there in Venezuela. He's not even bringing those across. He bringing the other ones and claiming for help for them and all this type of. So it's clearly a mental health scene. So I would leave that alone, right? But that is on its face nonsense, right? So then we have other groups. I saw one popping up about on TikTok about keeping some seminar, some week seminar, and they're going to teach you about sovereignty and all these type of things. Now this is a serious thing when it comes to they speaking about sovereignty. Sovereignty was invented by the ones who invaded our lands. We have no part in that. Sovereign citizen is nonsense. It's pure stupidity. And people calling out themselves as sovereign, that does not apply here on this land. And to do it across in the north, it has to be done properly, and it comes from a more perspective, right? So these groups who popping up with this type of sovereign talk, and they come to teach you about how to operate outside the system and the insovereign, that is pure nonsense. There was on TikTok holding us, I can't remember the name now, but that's a next group, right? And then we have a next group pop up, and they calling themselves Empress and Matriarchs. So now let me go into the actual structure of what indigenous look like. An empress has to deal with an emperor. Empress and emperors come from imperialism. imperialists are the ones who invaded with their raping and pillaging lands all over, indigenous lands all over, right? So in empress and emperor could never be associated with the indigenous. It's pure nonsense, right? So that this empress, this one, and empress that one from Alubera, and this one is a bag of nonsense. Furthermore, there is a key structure that people missing. There's a bunch of females who jumping out without any inclination that they have any male ties or they have any husbands or anything like that, and they run in the indigenous as if it's some new type of feminist movement. So let me structure this up properly. Indigenous people never had matriarch. Matriarch is a new term that they come up with recently, right? In the Arawakai language, it's called the Oyo, right? It's a relevant term in English as a great mother, a great one, a great female mother. Well, not a female mother, a great female being, right? How this is done, be dealing with it post invasion, because remember we had our structure before they invade the lands, and then we had to restructure after the invasion. How this is set up is after invasion, obviously the tribes scattered, right? We at war. There must be a war chief involved. How? The war chief has to go up against the invaders, right? And be successful in repelling them off the land, or initiating the phases to repel them off the land, right? Back then it would have been bloodshed and violence. Now it's a different order, right? So a matriarch comes into play after a war chief wins the battle. He carries the plan and strategy to an eligible feminine, right? And here's the eligibility. She must be a mother and a grandmother, a wife, a daughter. Well, obviously she would be a daughter because she's female, right? And a sister, right? Let me just get them correct. Grandmother, mother, wife, right? And the two is given, right? All of a sudden, we have a bunch of people jumping out here calling themselves matriarch, and they show no chiefs with them. Even if they show a chief, we don't know where this chief come out from, what war did he win, and how does this war that he won applies to all indigenous people that they could use to free themselves from the invaders' grip. So you have a bunch of them jumping out, and they creating this like you could just appear poof and be a matriarch, and they running out. And because people don't know, they get the views and the support and all that type of thing. But it is nonsense, right? It is pure nonsense. Because if they can't show who is the chief and what war he won and what strategy he brought to them for them to multiply to free other indigenous people, then it's pure nonsense. Okay. That being said, now we move on to chiefs. We have a bunch of people jumping out and just calling themselves chief. Let me tell you how I became a chief. If I just said it before, I'm going to say it to you now. Again, in 2017, I found out that Elizabeth II was a fraud. Alright, a legitimate fraud. Queen's Counsel Bertie Gray and Queen's Counsel Roger Hamilton wrote this, proved this, and repeated this. It was a part of a case in 2011 with Min Waab who I affectionately call Mordi because he said his friends call him that and he wanted me to call him that, so I call him Mordi, but he is known to the Crown Court as John Anthony Hill. He proved before English jury that Elizabeth was a fraud also. Right, in 2017 we found out this. This blew my mind because basically what runs your society out here is the courts, not the police. The police is literally legal bad man. These are basically the baddest thing on the land. So it would be wise to give them the respect, right? The police is not basically the ones who give the orders. Neither is the, who else do the army, neither. Nor the Coast Guard, nor the Air Guard, none of them armed forces giving the or creating these laws or giving the orders. It comes from your judicial system. That's why they separate the government and the judiciary, right? So I don't want to go into all the nitty-gritty to get the video too long because I want to dissect this nonsense here. But I just need to give you a backstory so you can understand the facts about how this operates, right? So in 2017 we found out that Elizabeth was a fraud. So I found out that, and I like to give everybody the flowers. I found out that from a then chief. His name was Nanya Shabu El, or is, because I don't think he passed. He's still alive, right? For our personal reasons, we not connected like how we was before, but that's based on a doctrine stuff. So that is outside this discussion here. But however, he brought that to light, and we subsequently, or I subsequently went into research to get the instruments, the statutory instruments that Elizabeth enacted to get Trinidad and Tobago operational on the land, right? And in 2018, November November the 5th, I did it. I actually choose that date, and then November the 22nd was when we mailed it off and that type of stuff. So in 2018, I became the first indigenous being via paper, if you want to call it that, paperwork, because paper is everything now, right? And I became the first being in the Caribbean, the whole of Caribbean, from Jamaica straight down to here, right? So to Kairi, from Chimaka down to Kairi, right? So we then sorted out how we're going to multiply this to free everybody else. Basically, after the Battle of 1699, they turned it into paper genocide by bringing you the baptismal papers, and it turned into your birth papers, and that tie everybody under, well, crown corporate rule, right? My fight was to find a way to come out it. So me now, as a normal individual, going and dig up all this information and putting it together and then presenting it to the different parties, from Dr. Rowley to the United Nations to the Crown, right? When we finished the document, it was good at that time and good enough to proceed and multiply for everybody else to use, people who look like me on this land, to free themselves from outer corporate existence. So that is how I became the chief. I became the first person to put together the plan to break down the invaders, right? So that's how I became a chief. There are other things that individuals could do that would be a part of breaking the invaders' grip on the land that would render them worthy enough to be called a chief. From 2018 to now, we have not met anyone like that yet. I'm not saying that it's not going to happen. I'm saying it hasn't happened yet. So all these guys who was savages when they were with us, they didn't want to read and they didn't want to learn, and we had to move them aside. They got together and calling each other chief now. And now so we had exit a couple of them in about 2 years ago, and they had it was 7 of them plus some females now who calling themselves matriarch on the land, right? And they band together, and I was the problem. How I operating as a chief and how I doing things, I was the problem. When we move ourselves from them, they fell out with each other, and they started going. You could go and check the evidence. They have all the business out on the social media, and they start to fight one another, right? And so this guy here, he voluntarily left before that incident, but after we separate ourselves from the larger set of them, including some females with them, they took him back, right? So they bunched together, birds of a feather flock together. I can't give them the bird rank because there's a feather rank. So clowns in a ship take the same hit. So they group together and they fall out and they have the problems now. So wherever that's stemming from, this guy, his name is Maurice Acosta, right? He decides after what happened with them that he's probably going to do this. And I've seen about 3 videos with him that was brought to my attention, with him going about addressing the police like this, right? So before I play the video, this is something that members of Kairi and Alubera indigenous people will not ever do. So anybody you hear with this name and they getting on like that, as I told you before, and I know officers not into this that much, but you need to get into it because these people and them coming out. So just call me to verify if they are a member of the tribe or not. And I will give you the information, and then you could proceed and do what you have to do, right? So, alright, so let me go forward and play this video and dissect it. So this is the guy here, one of the guys who I was telling you about, right? And he is now, so I will have to do this video probably in 2 parts, but we do have to go through this, what he going through here, simply because we already had our day in court in the Arima High Court, and the traffic offense that one of our tribe members was up against, he won his case, basically, right? And that's why our ID and things like that are known to the police out there, right? So we don't have to go through that. We don't antagonize the police. We don't go through none of that type of nonsense that you would see in this video here. And just for reference, I'm going to run this here for you just to get into this here. 1 second. Just give me 1 second here. Okay, so right, this is what one of our IDs would look like, right? You might be able to barely see, wouldn't be able to see the actual information, or you could scan this QR code down here, and it will take you to the information. But this is how our stuff looks. This is how our declaration looks. There are many pages with this document, about 40 something pages, right? But this is how it looks, right? So what this individual here is attempting to do is sound as if he knows what he's speaking about, sound as if he is indigenous, and most of all, if you look at his videos, he seems to be very much antagonizing the police officers, right? So we'd play the video, I'd pause it, and I'd break it down, and so you could get a better understanding, right? So here goes. I don't know why there's this stupid music in the background. I will start over and I'll pause it. It's not actually the start of the video. I'm waiting for it to start back, then I'll pause it. Do have a Facebook account. I've been banned from Facebook, and so I have to do it like this.
I already explained to you that driver's permit is a legal thing according to the United Nations.
We'll get to that with what he's saying there.
I don't know what you can do. Huh? I don't know what you can and cannot do. As I told you already, that is illegal and I am not part of that. Alright. Rights of the indigenous people. Automobile?
Right. So this is a traffic warden you'd see up on screen here, and he would be asking him something, and he'd hear his response. Driver's license and insurance for the vehicle, please, sir. This is his response.
As I told you, those private illegal certificates and permits are no longer recognized by the United Nations.
Right. You see, as he told him before, those private license or whatever you call it is no longer recognized by the United Nations. Right? He would call a document in question, the United Nations Declaration. Is this document here. Right? There is no such thing in any article, because our videos in about 2019 or 2020 with me reading out this whole thing. There is nothing in it that says that driver's license and these things are illegal, right? What he is attempting to speak about is something that I spoke about when he was around the tribe at that point in time. And I will not repeat it because everything we say, they're taking it and coming out here and speaking this set of nonsense and making it look like anybody who wanted this indigenous thing, apparently like the screws loose or they're going mad or they're already mad or some type of stuff. But basically what he's speaking there is pure nonsense. The United Nations recognize every corporation, every country as sovereign within their own right, right? Indigenous people, right, according to this document, right, are sovereign in their own right as well. So from the time you say indigenous, it covers all of that. You do not have to say sovereign, right? Indigenous and sovereign, that is like redundant. That is being redundant. Right? And basically, if you go into the depth and the original, the etymology of the word is not even that either. Right? It came across here with the invaders who were called the black nobility. Right? And they came up with their maritime laws, and that's where sovereign and that type of thing come in. Right? So it has nothing to do with indigenous people, although from being indigenous, you are sovereign within your own right. Okay? So, what he's saying there is pure nonsense. I would tell you what I was speaking about that he picked up and trying to say here. I was speaking about the International Criminal Court. And if you want to know, well, you could inbox me private and I'd tell you what it was I was speaking about. right? But I'm not going to put that kind of information out in the public domain because clearly people just picking it up and running out and talking a pack of nonsense with it, right? So we could go through the articles if you want. Go through the articles. I just show you the document. Go through all the articles and tell me if you see anything in there that says driver's permit and the likes are recognized as illegal according to him by the United Nations, right?
It is very clear in United Nations declarations on the right.
He said it is very clear in here. That's what he's saying. It's very clear in here. But it's not. It's not in here. Or no such allusion is in here. I can tell you what is in here. Indigenous people have the right to travel. Right? And this is the next thing that they pick up because they so love this sovereign citizen nonsense and bullshit that all they picking up is a set of things that they're seeing coming out of the north social media and feel that it applies here. Here was conquered by the Crown, right? The Crown created the American Crown Trust as a buffering zone for the United States of America Corporation. That is not what happening here. Here is directly called, according to them in their system, the Commonwealth. So that nonsense he's speaking is North stuff, and those in the North who speaking it just get boots up in court if they don't have it correct, right? So again, and you would hear him call individuals' name who I spoke to personally and who I know for a fact don't know about what happening down here because they refer to me to find out how these things apply down here. Because of course, again, as I told you before, we were the first, we are the first, and we set the trend for how it running out here with this document, with these documents, right? We taught everybody who talking it from Jamaica to here, from Chimaka to here, everybody who talking about it heard it from us, right? Or from someone who heard it from us, right? So let me go ahead.
Rights of indigenous people. It is very clear. If you want me to show you it, I can show you it.
What they should have done was ask him to show them it. So in the future, officers of the corporation, right? Anytime anybody claiming to be indigenous and they claim that certain things give them the power to do certain things, ask them to present it, right?
I am not making this up.
Oh yes, he is making it up because it does not exist.
It is very clear the Prime Minister, Dr. Keith Christopher Rowley, signed an agreement of the document.
I don't know what he's speaking of here, right? He's signed and he's in agreement with the document, right? This is how old our stuff is, right? If you look at this closely, you'd see this get wet and it got broken up. If you look at this here, you'd see AR. That is advice of receipt card. This is what we give them to sign after, or when we send out a package to them. This is what we give them. Let me see if I find a good one. Oh, okay, there's a better one. Let me just block this off. Here, right, there's a better one here, right? An advice of receipt. Someone has to sign for receiving the package so that we know it's delivered, right? On all our advice of receipts, we never once had Keith Rowley's actual signature signing anything that he received. And if you're thinking commonsensically, these people in their office do receive documents like that. There's always a buffering zone between them and the public in terms of documentation and that type of thing. So now I'm not sure that this individual, Maurice Acosta, has mental health issues. If it turns out that he has mental health issues, then obviously there would be a different approach. But as so far as I am aware, he's not clinically diagnosed with mental health problems, right? So this is why I'm taking him apart, because they volunteer to leave because of because of the savage ways and the inability to be a part of a team, much less a tribe, right? And so you leave that. We told you that you can't go with these things, but you're out there promoting yourself as if you're one of us when you have nothing to do with us and we have nothing to do with you. As a matter of fact, we distance ourselves from clowns like you, right?
I forwarded my documents to him. If he's not speaking to you all need to speak to him.
Driving this vehicle.
I am not driving.
All right, so he forward his document. If he's not speaking to you, right? Again, it is the business of the indigenous people to properly identify themselves. All he is doing is yap, 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 right? With nothing to back it up. Just as how I can show you our documents published like this. Boom, boom, boom. Oh. Like this. And this is a QR code on our ID, right? There's a QR code with it. These are the pages with it. This is the document that goes with it and all that type of thing. This is the proof that we have for our stuff, right? He's just talking. So when we out in the public domain, we must have proper presentation to identify ourselves. Oh, this ad is coming up here. I'm promoting no ad, right? So, right, let's continue.
Vehicle.
So what is this?
I am operating my.
Right. This is stuff he learned from us as well. He is not driving. As a matter of fact, you are driving. You are Maurice Acosta, citizen of Trinidad and Tobago. There is no documentation published stating that you are indigenous, that you... Furthermore, when he was with us, he had an honorary status. An honorary status is somebody who have good intentions to work with the tribe and have certain things that they could add to push the thing forward. He had an honorary status. The reason why he had an honorary status is because he took the bioweapon jab, right? And that renders you incapable of being part of a tribe because we're not multiplying no bioweapon injection called a vaccine, right? That is the same COVID nonsense that was promoted a couple of years ago. He has that in his system, so he was always an honorary member. So for him to reach this distance, I don't know if it's because of the bioweapon injection having malfunctioning, but for him to reach this distance clearly shows that he's not thinking straight, right? So he's speaking about corporate, the difference between corporate and the difference between indigenous. Under the corporate concept, all citizens are drivers, right? That's why when you go to a company, when you go to a company and you get hired for a job like that, is called a driver because it's actually a corporate job, right? So if you're not employed like that, then you could never be a driver, right? And then if you're not a driver, then you don't need no license to drive, right? That's basically literal common sense, right? And if you don't need that, you must have some other representation or documentation of how you are traveling, right? So the indigenous people could use a broom to travel, a witch broom. If that's skillful, they could use a spaceship, they could use whatever they want to travel because they have the right to travel unhindered. That is in here, right? Oh, you know what? It might be better. I don't want to have to go through the whole document, but let me see how fast I could grab up the right to travel. Mark out here security, labor security. Okay, it's 46 articles. Right, but basically they're not explicitly written like that, but you have the right to travel according. Oh, yeah. So, Article 36. Article 36, right, as you can see the mark out there. Article 36 states 36.1 Indigenous people in particular, those divided by international borders, have the right to maintain and develop contact, relations, and cooperation, including activities for spiritual, cultural, political, economic, and social purposes, with their own members as well as other people across borders. So, right, so this giving you the right to travel across borders, within borders, that type of thing. States in consultation and cooperation with Indigenous people shall take effective measures to facilitate and exercise and ensure the implementation of this right. Right? So basically, the state like Trinidad and Tobago supposed to support the right we have to travel as Indigenous people. However, there is not, you hear old granny used to say, it's not what you're doing, it's how you're doing it. If you do it like this, the police going to think all Indigenous people is stupid like that, right? And that is quite the opposite. He is an isolated individual who doesn't even know how much problems he is in right now, right? And he is taking advantage of the lack of knowledge of the public, because the public now get involved, and we know what the Trinity mentality is. If foreign don't say it, is not something now. But we saying it 8 years, it had to go to foreign to come back for everybody to jump on the Indigenous bandwagon. Okay, cool, right? But note that there were people who study this from before they now getting the hype, and we have a structure up and running 8 years now, right? So we are asking you how this is going, we telling you how this is going, and we're the only people could tell you how it's going, because this, if you follow this alone, it will mislead you. This encourages people to become citizens. When this, as I told you before earlier on in the video, that the machinery that made this citizenry is diametrically opposed to the Indigenous people. They are the ones that disenfranchise the Indigenous people, right? So basically, and I fed up tell people that the United Nations are not our friends. Because, simple, there is a warrant out for Bibi Netanyahu for crimes against war crimes, right? And the United Nations seem to be very toothless at this point, right? Just for example. So we continue in the video before we run into a 2-hour-long video, right? I promised there would be 2 parts. I'm just doing this because tonight was the last question I could have take from somebody sending this video to me, so I had to come out and clear the air. So I didn't want it to be long and winded. I just wanted to get right to it with the structure and dissect this nonsense that he's speaking and put it out there once and for all, so people understand what the Indigenous is really about, and it's not this nonsense that Maurice Acosta, purporting to be an Indigenous documented being, is trying to do. So we continuing.
Private automobile. Do you know what is a vehicle?
Alright, sir. But don't you have to have a driver's permit to operate that? Well, officer, if you doesn't have a
Driving.
right, this is all you have.
Normally what would happen in a situation like this, he's supposed to get arrested and taken in because he's clearly a rogue person on the road, right? He has zero documentation. He's not providing any documentation, any valid documentation for that matter. He's moving around with stolen intellectual property that will catch up with him very soon, and he is talking a pack of nonsense, right?
Basically here, you know. Right, sir. I'm coming to
Check on the name, sir.
And they should have really taken him in, because he was supposed to go in front of a magistrate or a judge, right? We, the ones who operate like this, we prefer dealing with a judge, but people like him, it doesn't matter. He's a citizen, right? So they should have taken him in front of a judge and let him tell the judge what he told them, that the United Nations doesn't recognize any license and thing as legal and all that type of stuff. This is what he should have told them. This is what they should have done, as a matter of fact. Alright, battery just kind of run low. Just top up before we continue to play. Okay, here we go. Just brighten up a bit. Okay.
Say again, I don't understand what you said. I don't know what you can and cannot do. I have no jurisdiction over you to tell you what you can and can't do.
I don't see the relevance of how or what he answering, because he didn't ask him if he knows what he could and couldn't do. So I'm not seeing the relevance of this line or response.
I explained to you that driver's permit is a legal thing according to the United Nations.
And again, that's wrong. According to the United Nations, driver's permit is not illegal, right? There is something to do with torts and license that are illegal, but it's not the United Nations that promotes that information, right? It's not them. There is a connection, but it's not them, right? And as I said before, I'm not gonna say it here, because as I see these videos now, I know little song bites of what I say, because these people don't read anything, because they're that lazy, right? Because they don't read anything, they just take song bites out of what I say and come out here and talk this pack of nonsense, right? So there is a concept that if you have to get a license to do something, it is considered illegal, right? Because you shouldn't have to get licensed to do something that's supposed to be normal or natural to do, right? But that is something for a legal explanation and not for the general public, basically. So that is more or less tribal information.
I don't know what you can and cannot do.
I don't see no relevance for the answer.
As I told you already, that is illegal and I am not part of that. Alright.
And you would notice that the video would cut off. You would get no follow-up. You would get no nothing like that. The videos is different officers that he's antagonizing, with no follow-up to let you know what happened or anything like that. Well, we see the videos kind of dwindle down now, because probably, I don't know if our stuff has reached him yet, but I see like it kind of dwindled down now. But no follow-up, no follow-through, no receipts. All right?
Rights of the indigenous people. Automobile.
Let me tell you another reason why I do agree with some of this document here. You see, this word here, I'm going to teach you something now, and you take take a pen or a pen and mark a note so you remember where you hear it first. This word here, rights, with a S on the end. In the reality of law, there is no plurality of right. There is one right, and that is your birthright. Hence the reason why indigenous people is the highest status on the land, because of their birthright that entails all other right within it, or with the point of plurality too, but it's just basically one right, your birthright. It is our knowledge and our record that we were birthed here first. Our ancestors was here first. Our ancestors made here, and that's how we come about, right? And that's our birthright, right? The land is ours, everything else is ours. And like I say, not because we have this knowledge, we're looking to put people out of the place or nothing like that. That is not what we're about. We're about restoration and recovery of indigenous heritage and our birthright, right? So those of you who now hearing the information, is not nothing to be scary about if you don't look like me, right? There's a lot of people who do look like me who have indigenous bloodline mixed into them and that type of stuff. It's not like that. It's about the indigenous people getting back what is rightfully theirs, right? So within all of that, the right to travel, the right to your land, the right to your spiritual practices, the right, all these type of things is embedded in that one right. And as the law would recognize it, there is no plurality of rights. So this here, the United Nations should have known that, don't you think? Right. And so let me just listen to the rest of the video before I close this off, because I realize I'm probably into the 2-hour mark already. Right. So that brings us to the end of the video. There would be no support for this type of nonsense. There will be no acquiescence to this type of nonsense. All right? We run a tight ship. We work with everyone who seeks our interests and who would recognize our interests and respect our interests. That's how we work. We're not out here to antagonize any law enforcement agency or send threats to the government and all that type of stuff. There is enough information out there, including this information there, that the government and its parts know what they're supposed to do. So me going out there and protesting and doing all this type of stuff is nonsensical, because they are aware. Of course, if we sit down and do nothing about it, we know the system is corrupt and their interests does not align with ours. But that doesn't mean that we have to reach to a point of antagonizing or violence or anything like that. It is already set. All corporations around the world are crashing just by sheer design, just by how they are designed, they are crashing. And then we have this guy, the CEO of the US corporation, who is fast tracking the economic doom. So it's nothing really for indigenous people to fight about, really, right? Because after corporations fall, indigenous people will still be here. We was here before and we will be here after, right? So we do really be out there. We made one appearance and it wasn't a protest. It was basically a silent walk opposing the 60th anniversary of the corporation on our lands. And that is as much as anybody could say that we did anything kind of resembling a protest, right? But that was to make people aware that we out here, that we are alive and we haven't gone anywhere, and we are for the restoration of our people and our right. So that was for. But anything other than that is kind of like nonsensical, because the information is out there. The parties involved know what they're supposed to be doing, be it they corrupt or not. That is that. What we have to do as Indigenous people is make our presence felt. We have to establish ourselves as, how to put it, as an independent force to reckon with. Not a violent force, but an economic force, an intellectual force, and basically the owners of the land, right? So with that, I think let me just run over the points that we highlight so I could check it for future reference when I do the part 2. We talked about the number of groups that popping up and speaking about stupidity like sovereignty and sovereign citizen and that type of stuff. We talk about the people who was a part of us, and because of their savage ways and the inability to form a team, much less a tribe, we have been separated from them. They now jumping out and calling each other chiefs when none of them ever win any war that would apply to all Indigenous people. Then we have on the female side of things, we have a bunch of them running out by themselves. Oh, and there's the next thing. There was never, at no point in time, after, and this Indigenous law now, LORE, there is no point in time after women used to self-pregnate. After that phase, they changed out and brought us about. There is no point in time in the Indigenous history or our story that females stood alone. If you go back on this island, you would always hear the same narrative bouncing, and the females were fiercely protected, and and the females were fiercely protected, and you could hardly see the females because they were fiercely protected. And it was every time they mentioned about the Indigenous females on these land, they were fiercely protected by the males. That's why they was never upfront like that, and that's why the roles of the female had gone back into protection because of the invasion. So anytime you see a group of women jump out here and they're talking about this and that, and they are the power this and they are the power that and the power, and they provide no structure or no history as to what gave them that power, where they're coming from, let alone calling themselves by names that is not indigenous to this land, is nonsense. So that's the other thing. And then we have groups who claiming to be indigenous, like Santa Rosa First People, who was a government proxy from back in 1992 with a Hindu leader. He's not chief, right? So that is nonsense as well. So we debunk all that stuff. So now when you're going through and you're listening about the indigenous, you have to ask these people these things. From the time they come out and say they are chief, ask them what war they win that they could have been applied to all indigenous people to help them with their freedom and their birthright. If somebody come out and say they are matriarch, ask her who is her husband and what war did he win and bring the remedy to her for her to multiply for the generations of indigenous people, right? If somebody jump up and say there's a chief, ask them that same question. What war did he win? And where's your structure? Where's your great mother who's supposed to be the head of your or joint head? Because these people feel like was imbalance type of situation happening where women alone used to run things alone and they alone operating and that type of, I even hear them going as far as to say that is people who never did any research. They could provide no receipt to show you that was happening here on this land, right? But they would go through Dr. Nicole Gonzalez, I'd like to refer to her, go through all these scholars and scientists who did not much research, but did research on this island, and they would tell you the women were fiercely protected and hardly ever seen. And that is because when the invaders came in, they attacked the bloodline. And so that was a part of some research I was to bring forward again, with the bloodlines being the actual reason for the raping and the pillaging of the lands. But again, I love to put together my receipts and things to bring that out in the public domain. But when we have time, because right now what we're doing is kind of building more economic stands for the indigenous people. So we don't have time for social media garbles and this type of nonsense. But we do have a name to protect, because we see people attempting to steal our intellectual property and impersonate us out in the public domain, right? So these things, you're only as good as the name, and these things are worth protecting, right? So in future, anytime you see these people come about, ask them these questions, right? Otherwise, you would be listening to nonsense. Otherwise, you're a sitting duck, right? So this, I would have to close it off here. So this would be part 1 of debunking the nonsense outside. I'd give them a chance to prove themselves, a chance to say what I say is stupidity and prove it wrong, right? And they all know that we operate off our constitution, an example of a constitution that was brought before, and then we made a constitution for us here, and that's the example that we follow. So if they want to come and tell you that there is this and there is that, let them show you the structure and show you the peoples representing the structure, right? So be wise. Ask a whole heap of questions, and not just a whole heap of questions. Ask the right questions, and I now give you the right questions to ask. Anybody say there's a chief, ask them what war they win to multiply, to help free the indigenous people, right? Ask them that. If a female says she's a matriarch, ask her for her husband and what war. Or she could win a war, because she could be a war chiefess too as well, right? I don't want to forget that out. She could win a war too as well and become a war chiefess. But once she's a war chiefess, she has to have a husband as well, who she would now bestow the title of chief on, because she given it to him because of the battle that she fought, right? So it could happen like that as well. So ask them what war did they win that could be multiplied for everybody else. And when I say multiply, it must be able to stand in court. Oh, as I say that, right now we are in the middle of history, our story, creating our story. And it's for the first time in recent history, or as a matter of fact, from the first time of the invasion of the Crown, this is the first time the indigenous people is having a voice to stand up against the Crown in the court of law, in a court of law, right? And that's Crown Court, the highest order court, basically in the system, right? I think they're giving Privy Council Privy Council's appellate court, so yeah. So it's one of the highest courts, and we up there right now on a face-off, and they already losing. They already at a deficit. They already admit that. So we just waiting on the dates and the proceedings. Obviously, I'd bring the transcript out. And, as I say transcript, we have another transcript to collect from the Arima High Court. But they don't say transcript, they say court extract for a judgment that was in our favor in terms of the same traffic scene here, right? And everybody who you see moving around with the ID card I showed before, that would apply. That judgment would encompass all of them, because the tribal union are Kairi and Alubera indigenous people. The tribes are the Tamanakos or the Tamanaks, the Chemas or the Chimas, the Kumanagotes or the Kumanapagotes, and the Arawakai. Right? Those are the tribes recorded by Laurent Morden Fraser in the 19 to 17, I forget the exact date, but in the 1700s, and the book is in the government printry, Trinidad and Tobago Corporate Government Printry. Right? So they are aware that these are the tribes that they disenfranchise. I am the chief of those tribes, and we're here. Right? So for any further information, you could feel free to reach out. Feel free to ask questions. I welcome questions. That's where we thrive. Right? And furthermore, anybody that you can't ask a question or running away from answering questions is what you call, I don't want to say cult, because cult is short from culture, but is what you call a rogue group. Is a rogue group with nefarious intentions, basically, right? So all that said, yeah, I think that's about it. So Wadu to all, stay safe, and we will meet again in part 2 and any other updates that come in between. Right? Chief Min Waab, Tamuna Fuset, Ika Siya, Wadu.